Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest, and she goes by the name of Katie Mullen. Katie Mullen's a sales trainer consultant with her own company called MMS Consulting. Now, Katie has spent over 10 years in medical device sales, and now she spends her time training sales professionals on how to be better. She's a popular LinkedIn influencer with some of her content reaching as many as 40,000 people. So if you're listening to this right now, you're someone that either wants to get into medical sales, you're already there, or you're looking to transfer to a new field within medical sales. This is an episode you absolutely have to listen to. But I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to save it all for the interview. So as always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things differently in the medical sales space. And I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Katie, how are we doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am fantastic, and we're glad to have you. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Katie Mullen, and I am a sales trainer and consultant and author in the works. And what I do is I typically train sales teams on how to be better salespeople. So it's everything from I have all different things that I teach. And really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach people how to get out there and get new customers, because so often in sales, people are really either hunters or farmers. And, a lot of times what we end up doing is just becoming kind of order takers, where we just wait for the phone to ring and wait for existing customers to order from us. And really, there's no way to build your funnel appropriately if you're just doing that. So a lot of what I do is teach people how to get out there and find those customers using new techniques, but also just traditional techniques like the phone and email and I use a lot of data and research in my sales training to teach people how to do those effectively so that they can make the best use of their time. And then I also get into stuff like presentations and LinkedIn and some newer tools like video messaging. So kind of all across the board. And typically what I do is I'll go into a sales team when they're having their yearly sales meeting or their, every 6 month sales meeting, whatever it is. And I go in and do like a whole day of training with their whole sales team. And we do a lot of interactive stuff, as well as a lot of just learning all and absorbing all the data and all the research that I have.
Nice. So do you do this for your own organization? Do you work for an organization? How do you do this?
No, it's all me. So I did a lot of sales in my career. I started off in sales at an early age, and I really loved sales. And then I ended up getting into medical device sales when I was about 25. And I did that for about 10 years. And the whole time I was doing that, I was always this de facto sales trainer. They would say, oh, somebody new is starting, call Katie Mullen, she'll get you sorted out. So I eventually kind of came up with my own sales and training materials because it was just easier and quicker for me to do that when I was doing so much training of people anyway. And as I was doing that, I realized, I really enjoy this. I really enjoy teaching people how to do sales and how to be the best salesperson they can be. And so my husband's actually a physician. So when we moved to Denver, when I was 35, I had to give up my sales territory. I was doing Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. And so I had to give that up when I moved. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to become a sales trainer and a sales consultant. And so I started doing that, and companies started hiring me to do that. And so I've been doing that ever since. So I just work for myself. I have my own company, and I do all the training myself.
Fantastic. So let's talk about who you serve. Is it primarily medical device sales? Is it any type of healthcare sales? Is it beyond healthcare? Talk to us a little bit about the type of companies you typically work with.
Sure. Yeah. My niche, I would say, is medical device sales. It's really what I know best, but I have done selling in all kinds of different industries. And when I first started my company, I was intending to be just medical sales. In fact, my company is called MMS Consulting, which stands for Mullen Medical Sales Consulting. But as the time has gone on, I have noticed that I have gotten some interest from people outside of the medical community because I do think that sales, a lot of times it translates to every industry. So I would say still my niche is medical device sales and medical sales in general, probably about 80% of my business, but I do still do quite a few in that other 20% as well.
Awesome. So, I want the audience to get the gravity of who I'm talking to. So I am going to highlight something that you did recently. Katie Mullen, she is an influencer on the LinkedIn space, and she had a post where she garnered 40,000 reactions on the LinkedIn platform talking about an element of selling. That is a feat within itself, Katie. Talk to us a little bit about how you made that happen and really what it's done for you.
Sure. Yeah. That post actually is over almost 5 million views too, which was really crazy high for that.
Wow.
And I think, I've always had ever since I started, I've had a pretty healthy audience and on LinkedIn, but that one obviously was really off over the top. And I think that I just really hit a nerve within the LinkedIn community. And I think the LinkedIn algorithm really likes a little bit of controversy. So one of the reasons that post did so well, I think, is not everyone agreed with me. So the topic was nobody is interested in your company history. No one cares what year you were invented. And that was based on a lot of research I had done with customers where I had gone out and said, what are your pet peeves when somebody comes in and tries to give you a presentation? And a lot of the customers were saying, hate it when they come in and do a bunch of slides about how they were invented in 1972. And this is how great they've been since then. And it was very consistent. The customers really don't like this. But for some reason, particularly in the medical space, I believe, they often start with this. It's literally the first 3 slides of every presentation. It's just what everyone does. And I don't think people realize that customers hate it so much. And so when I posted about it, I had a bunch of people agree with me, probably 90%, but probably 10% adamantly disagreed with me. And they would say, well, I think it's so important for people to know us and know who we are and know that we're trustworthy and our history is so rich and we need to tell them this. And so there was a lot of discussion really within the LinkedIn community of who's right about this and who's wrong and what should we be doing instead. And so I think that's why it hit such a nerve, is because there was some disagreement and a lot of people really not wanting to give up that, what they've been holding on to for so long, which is the company history slides.
Wow. And the idea for this, how did you come up with the idea for it?
Well, when I first started my company after I left the medical company that I was at for so long, I decided, how can I make myself different as a sales trainer? There's so many sales trainers out there. And, it wasn't enough, in my opinion, to just have been successful. And so I actually went out and did all this research and picked up the phone and found hundreds of customers across the country to ask all these questions. And so when I come up with my content on LinkedIn, a lot of what I'm doing is just going back to the research that I've done and pulling content from that. And so that's one of the pieces of content directly from my customer research. And that's from the mouths of customers. That's one of their top 5 pet peeves when people come in and do a sales presentation.
That is fantastic. So 5 million views, 40,000 reactions on just one post. What has it done for you as far as business?
Well, one of the main things it's done for me is obviously create a lot of open doors. And one of them is I actually got a call from a publisher, or several publishers, and they said, gosh, you have all this great content. You have all this training. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And so I had thought about it before, but hadn't really ever prioritized it. And so I did end up signing a contract to write a book. Nice. And I love to write. And so it's been really fun because I already have all this content. I do deliver 8 hours worth of a sales day of training. And so I just kind of have been taking my content and putting it into the book and with some additional stuff as well. And I only have so much time when I give my sales trainings to get into the customer data and research that I've done. So it's been kind of fun because I've been able to get into that even more in the book, which has been a really fun to have the time to really dig in and share all that.
Absolutely. So this is an interview and I have an interview question.
Yes.
What would you say ever since you decided to go this route, start your own business and provide this amazing sales service? What would you say your proudest moment has been as an entrepreneur selling sales improvement services?
Well, let's see. I would say my proudest moment would be I got a message after couple of my very first ones that I did. And it said, from a very established sales rep, because that's one of the problems with going in and doing this is you have a lot of sales reps who've been in the industry for 20 years and they're like, oh, great, another sales training. Sit through another one.
These are the facts.
And so this sales rep was pretty established, had been around for a long time. And she wrote me a message and said, I just wanted you to know that I've been through tons of these trainings and yours was by far the best I've ever been through. I learned so many things and I'm really excited to get out and use some of the techniques that you taught us. So that meant a lot, obviously, coming from someone who'd been through this before and was very established.
That is beautiful. So let's get into it. Of course, we're not gonna get 8 hours of training in our 20 minutes here, but let's get into, tell us a little bit about, let's talk about access. You mentioned access earlier. What are some of the top things, that sales reps can do? Right now there's a lot of medical sales listening to this episode. Give us top 3 things that you would just advise sales reps to be doing in the field when they're trying to get access to their customers.
The top one is to pick up the phone. So many sales reps don't want to pick up the phone. It can be uncomfortable. There's a thing called call reluctance, and it really is real. And so, but there's a lot of research that was done. There's a company called SalesLoft that they did some research that if you just stick with one method, so if you just stick to email, you're going to be 77% less effective. If you just stick with phone, you're going to be 95% less effective. You got to combine different ways to get to the customer. And what is often forgotten is truly the phone. And so what sales reps will do is they'll just email, or maybe there's some research also from SalesLoft that shows that often they just stop after a try or two. So we've got I'm a big fan of what I call polite persistence. We just have to keep trying, and we never, say, oh gosh, it's been so hard to get a hold of you, and act annoyed. We just keep politely trying over and over again, but we've got to pick up the phone. You're so much more likely to get a meeting and to get some information from the customer if you pick up the phone and catch them rather than just trying to email them. They're going to be busy. They're going to just blow you off on email most of the time. So that would be one of the main things I would say is don't be afraid to pick up that phone. And another one of the research data points that I found that was really interesting in my research was I asked them, I said, what advice would you give to salespeople? If your niece or nephew was going into medical device sales, they'd never been in it before. And they said, Uncle Steve, I know you deal with a lot of sales reps. What can I do? What advice would you give me? And I had 56% of customers give me the same phrase, which I thought was so shocking because it was an open-ended question. And so for 56% to say the same phrase was really crazy. And the phrase was be friendly. And they would go on and explain, so often they come in and they're in a rush, or they assume that I can meet with them at the time that they happen to be coming through town, or they demand that I tell them when we're going to be budgeting for such and such. So they said the main thing they need to do is just be friendly and make my life easier. And so every interaction that you have with customers, whether it's phone, whether it's email, whether it's leaving voicemail, whether it's actually starting to have a conversation or doing a presentation, just focus that all around being friendly and smiling and forcing yourself to smile even when you might not feel like smiling. And when you're talking on the phone, look in the mirror and smile at yourself. Your voice will sound so much warmer than if you're looking like this and you're just talking very normal. So and sometimes it's nerves. A lot of times, honestly, it's they don't act friendly because they're nervous, particularly for those newer sales reps. So just force yourself to always be thinking about being friendly all the time. And then the last thing I would say, just a general piece of advice, is to remember that customers don't care about you. What they really care about are themselves. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I do in my training is I'll put up a slide and I've pulled everybody's photo off of LinkedIn ahead of time. And so I'll throw up the slide of everybody that's there and I'll say, okay, where did your eyes go? And somebody always, chimes in and says, I went to myself. My eyes went to me. And that's true because we care about ourselves. And that's the bottom line. So and that's why customers don't like it when we go in and talk about our job history or our company history, because they don't care about us. What they do care about is themselves. So if you can just keep it focused on them, and we're not asking questions like, so how was your weekend? I mean, you can ask those questions and there's a time and a place for those, but it's truly getting into their pain points and what their day-to-day life is like, and avoiding headaches and solving problems is what they are going to really care about. So always keep it about them, not about you.
Love it. Okay. You ready for more probing, Katie?
I'm ready.
Okay, so when it comes to medical sales reps, specifically field-based medical sales positions, case coverage, or even pharmaceutical or biotech, what would you say you see, again, maybe top two or three? What are the most common problems that you just see those types of reps doing over and over again?
Well, I think depending on the space that they're in, I think a lot of times reps are just going in and they're just sort of assuming that somebody's going to be available to talk to them. And so they're dropping in because they don't want to pick up the phone and make those appointments, or they just feel like, oh, if I call and they're not going to be able to get me. And that is, again, one of those pet peeves. Customers typically really don't like it to just be dropped in on and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? I'm in the area. So that's one thing I would say is a big problem for reps. And now, of course, during COVID, that was it really was fixed a lot because of the lack of access that we had. But now everything's starting to open up and get back completely to normal. So I think that's still a big problem. And then the second one, I guess I would say, is just people not understanding customers well enough. And that's hopefully what I can help them with, is understanding customers to understand what they like and what they don't like. For instance, a lot of times people are taught, when you go in and sell to somebody, just tell them you can save them money. Everybody wants to save money. If you can tell them their ROI is going to be better, they'll love it. But this actually came up as one of my big customer pet peeves. And the reason for this is that, and I will differentiate between opening with that versus getting into that deeper into the conversation. But if you open with that, customers are like, listen, you have no idea how much I'm spending. How can you possibly know that you can save me money? And I'm the one that negotiated the first deal. So if you're saying you could save me money and that the first deal is bad, you're kind of telling me I did a bad job. And you're not coming from a position of knowledge. You have nothing, nothing about our industry and what we're dealing with. And it's all just white noise. Everybody's telling me they can save me money. So it doesn't differentiate you at all. Let's get into it further. So you want to never start with saying I can save you money. And that's just an example of, people not necessarily knowing customers well enough to know that. Got
it. All right. Let's flip it and let's talk about the rock stars. I'm sure you've done this long enough where you've seen a consistency, almost a pattern, for lack of a better word, for people that just do the right thing and continue to attain success in the sales space. Again, top three things. What would you say those rock stars are consistently doing that you just keep seeing, that if anyone chose to do those things on a consistent basis, they're going to see some serious headway in their territory?
Sure. I would say one of the main things is being a good listener and being truly interested in the customer and wanting to get to the bottom of things. So sometimes what people do is they'll ask a question and you can tell they're just waiting to pounce and say, oh my gosh, that's so great that you want that because we have this awesome feature. And then they start getting into all the things instead of sitting back and listening and saying, okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding this. You're saying this, what happens when blah, blah, blah happens, and gathering as much data as you possibly can from that customer so that then you can turn it around at the end when it's time to frame up your solution and you have all the information about what they need. So the first thing would be just being an awesome listener. And I think this is really interesting, really being a good listener, because I've known sales reps that, when you think of a sales rep, you think of somebody who's very charming, very smooth, can talk to anyone. And that's often not what it is, actually. I've known sales reps who were like that, who actually weren't very good sales reps because they did interrupt and they did want to be the one doing all the talking. And then I've known sales reps who were very shy and you're like, I can't even believe you're in sales, honestly, because you're very shy. And you're not very outgoing, but those often are actually the best ones because they are great listeners and they invite a lot of information to be thrown their way. And then the second thing would be just having that grit, being willing to be persistent. There's a really great book actually called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And she talks about how, talent is very overrated. And what really matters is being willing to do the hard work and just having that grit to keep going day after day and do the mundane. And I think that is so important in sales because so often picking up that phone and sticking with a weekly, setting yourself a reminder, okay, every single week, I'm going to prospect an hour's worth of new customers. Even if I was the top sales rep and I won the trip to Costa Rica or Puerto Rico, I'm still going to prospect because I want my funnel to keep growing week after week, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And then I would say the third thing would be people who are willing to try new things and who are optimistic. There's also some data out there about the more optimistic we are, the more successful we are in any business, but especially in sales. I think, I can't remember where I heard it, but 20 to 40% more likely to be successful if you're optimistic, because, you're willing to try new things and you're willing to get out there and keep going, and you don't get down, and people are more willing to want to be around you. So I'd say those are probably the top three.
I love it. And now let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about those that are entertaining, going into sales. For example, with our program, we talk to a lot of professionals that are in an industry and they're thinking about changing industries completely. And some of them come from very professional fields, like a physical therapist or a chiropractor, or in some cases, even an MD that no longer wants to practice medicine, but wants to be on the other side of the industry. For these types of individuals and everyone else, what would you say they need to ask themselves before they entertain medical sales? Like, what's that self check of questions that they go through and say, okay, you know what? If I can say yes to these things, then yes, this is for me. But if I can say no to these things, then I have no business getting into medical sales. Go ahead.
I would say there's a couple of things. I would say the first thing is, how willing are you going to be to pick up that phone? Because sometimes those people who have been in those positions, like an MD or a chiropractor, they have this jaded view of sales reps because they've had some annoying sales reps. And so they think to themselves, I don't want to be that annoying person. And so when it comes time to pick up that phone, they're like, oh, maybe I'll just email him. I don't want to bother him. And so if you have that view, I don't think you're going to be probably super successful, because you just have to. There's just no getting around the fact that you're going to have to go out there and be that annoying sales rep sometimes. And there are things you can do to be less annoying, but you're still going to be the sales rep knocking on that door at the end of the day. And then the next thing I would ask is, are you going to be able to be someone who is internally motivated week after week? Because it's a different kind of job. When you do chiropractic work or something like that, you're probably working for someone, you probably have a fairly good salary, and you can just keep coming in and somebody's going to tell you where to go, what to do. But in sales, the harder you work, the more money you make. So if you are worried that you're not going to be able to stay internally motivated to work hard, then your salary is going to be pretty limited. But the great side of that is that the harder you work, the more money you make. So if you're willing to get in there and work hard and be internally motivated, it's a great career for you.
Fantastic. Well said. So talk to us a little bit about your family dynamic. One thing I'd like to know about any guest on our show is, how are we able to rock this amazing career, provide these services, and still conduct a family? How do you make it work, Katie?
Well, I'm lucky that my kids are in school full time. So that is helpful. I talked to a gal the other day who was in sales, and she had a 9-month-old and like a 4-year-old or something. And I was like, oh, that's so hard, because you can't, I tend to wake up early and try to get, I try to work out, get in some emails and stuff before my kids even get out of bed, particularly in the summer. Summers are really the hardest in my opinion, for working moms, because all of a sudden, instead of having your kids in school all day, you got to drive them places. So even if they're doing stuff, there's still a lot of pick me up here. I need to do this. I'm not waking up till 9. So now all of a sudden I need breakfast, and it's, in the middle of your workday. Right. So I think for a mom, it's just about, I've literally sat in my car and done conference calls in my car before. I'll drive down to the park, do my call, and then drive back home. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just, you got to just make things work. And I did that even when my kids were little. I would get them in the car, and I'd be on the phone while we were sitting in the car, or go to a coffee shop or whatever it is while they were at the babysitter. So I think you could totally make it work. I think it's just, you got to be flexible and be real creative with how you're doing it. And you've got to have kids. I think it's helpful for the kids to understand what you're doing and why. Like my daughter's off school right now as I'm doing this, and I explained to her what I was doing, and she's off doing her own thing during it. I think it's really helpful for them to see mom doing something productive and, important.
Absolutely. Our kids should know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think it's very inspiring for them, and it helps them put things in context too. So you said earlier your husband's a physician. I got to ask, how much has this helped as far as, when you're trying to really figure out the best approach? Do you just bounce all your ideas off of him, or does it not quite work that way?
I would say it doesn't always work that way. He's a little bit Well, he's just your typical jaded, he's kind of like, oh, sales reps. And so I think that he sometimes will be willing to answer questions about things, which I think is very helpful. But he's also just one person. And I think that's the thing about sales reps is one of the things that I talk about in my sales training is different personality styles. There's four I think that have been identified through there's these two scientists from I think it was the 70s or the 80s, and their names were Merrill and Reed, and they identified four social styles that I think are super important in the sales world. One is a driver, and that's somebody who's like, let's get it done. Don't bore me with asking me about my weekend. Just tell me what I need to know, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And then there's the analytic, who's very different, who's like, I need every chart. I need every piece of data. I need to think about it. I need a lot of time to make my decision. And then there's the amiable, who's kind of a people pleaser, who's like real nervous to make decisions, but they want you to like them. And then there's the expressive, who are very charming. They're the life of the party. You're going to have remind them 10,000 times to get you the data that they told you they would get you. And so once you identify those four social styles, I think you realize that everybody's different. So just because one person thinks one thing, you can't just assume everyone. So my husband is very much a driver. So if you asked him, so do you like it when people ask you how your weekend was? He'd be like, no, please don't waste my time with that. But when I did my research, actually like 75% of customers said, sure, small talk's fine in moderation. And, once I'd get to know you. So I do think it's important to remember that not everyone likes to be sold to the same way.
Sure. Which category did you fall under?
I'm also a driver. Yes, I'm very much a driver. I've softened a little as I've gotten older, but I still am that way.
and I'm curious. So can you assess, you could, because you've had so much experience with this, can you just kind of meet someone and assess where they fall?
Sort of. I think there's definitely clues. And I talk about this in my training. There's clues. Like, for example, does somebody say, do they have a gatekeeper, a secretary or assistant? What did they say about them? How does their voicemail sound? Do they does it take a long time for them to get the voicemail across, or is it very short and sweet? Even like, how do they answer their phone? So there are some clues that you can gather. But the other thing is too, everybody has a little bit of both, that some people are like, is like an expressive driver, or maybe an amiable analytic. So everybody's got a little bit of both in them, a little bit of several things, I should say.
I got to ask then, did you assess me? Where do you think I fall under?
My assessment of you would maybe be an expressive.
Expressive. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So I got to be reminded. I got to be reminded to stay on task. I can get with that.
Well, you seem like you're kind of the life of the party. I would say you're an expressive driver would be my assessment. But I have a questionnaire. I'll send it to you. We'll see how you.
Yeah. I'll take it. And don't worry, everybody. My results will be in the show notes.
Yes. Oh, good.
So this is fantastic. I still want to ask you a few more questions around sales when it comes to, what makes an amazing sales rep. If you could give, one piece of advice. Okay, two things. I want to get your one piece of advice that you would tell any sales rep. One theme that I know exists is sales reps that have been in the game for a little bit longer than everyone else. They tend to be reluctant for new strategies, new ways of approaching how to do things. And oftentimes, if you can break that, once they see a new way, it's like, wow, they're just amazed, right? Speak to a little bit about what you see in that space, and then maybe give us one or two really creative ideas that you've seen that have helped a sales rep be more successful.
So one thing I think a great answer for this would be, one thing that I've really embraced is video messaging. So it's kind of like leaving a voicemail for someone, but you're putting a face to the name. And people are very reluctant to do this because they don't want to do their hair and find the right lighting. And it's just something new. It's scary. So whenever I have like a 30-minute training session I do on this. And by the end, I can tell everybody is just terrified, particularly the older sales reps that have been around for a long time. And I say, how's everybody feeling now? And, without fail, somebody will yell out terrified or scared or nervous or whatever. But the people who really embrace this, I remember one of the first texts I got from a guy after this, he said, you won't believe it, but I was being ghosted by a customer. And, I'd given them a budgetary quote. And then it was all a big rush. And then, of course, I didn't hear back forever. I kept following up, nothing. So he's like, I figured out what do I have to lose? So I sent him a video video message over text. And he said, I got a message back from him literally within seconds. And It was kind of a laughing, oh, I'm so sorry. I have been avoiding you because blah, 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 this and that. And he's like, it was so effective. And I was polite about it, but it just really reminded them, and they were much more likely to get back to me. And it was so great that after months of being ghosted, I finally know what's going on now. So I think that's a great example of somebody who's very established. They're set in their ways. It's not something they've ever considered before, but being willing to get out there and try it, because it can be really effective to try new things.
That is awesome. So did they just take a video with their phone, or was it through a platform that allows them to make videos for audiences?
So there's a lot of different ways to do it. My preferred ways are through text, but of course you can't do a super long one, but I don't recommend a super long one anyway. You can do it through LinkedIn, but you can only do it through LinkedIn if you're first degree connected. So you can't do it to, a second or third degree that you're trying to just get connected to. And then if you're going to do it over email, you have to use a platform. You can't just send it as an attachment. It'll get blocked for sure. So the different platforms, you can use YouTube, which of course is free. The problem with YouTube is that sometimes institutions will block the whole, will block YouTube entirely. I have actually found it to be pretty effective though, because it's not you're not sending it when you use something like Vidyard or Loom or BombBomb or some of those, they often suppress the images when it gets sent to them. So because if it's the first time you've sent them an email, it'll say, images have been suppressed for your safety or whatever. So you don't get that image, the video messaging image. Whereas for some reason with YouTube, it does tend to go through because you use it as a screenshot versus doing it as a platform like a GIF or something. So what I always recommend to people is try it first with YouTube because it's free and it's more likely to get through. And then if it's working well for you, then you can invest in one of those other ones that actually cost money. My favorite is actually something called Sales Mail. It's very easy to use. It's a little more expensive than some of the other platforms, but if you're willing to spend the money on it and you're going to do a bunch of them, I think it's so super effective and really easy to use.
Sales Mail. So if somebody had the money and they were going to do a bunch, you would advise Sales Mail over YouTube?
Well, yes, because it's a lot faster. So with YouTube, it's a whole process where you have to, upload the video just like you would any other YouTube video. You got to make sure you make it unlisted because you don't want to make it public because you don't want, you're one to such and such hospital going public, but you don't want to make it private because then you have to use a password to get into it. So you make it unlisted so that only anybody who has the link can get to it. So that's kind of tricky. You got to make sure you do that. Then you have to take a screenshot of yourself while you're talking and do a link to that screenshot. So it's a little bit more clunky, it just takes a while. Whereas with Sales Mail, you just open up the app, you push record, and then you can just zip it on over through email to somebody. So it's just faster. If you're going to be using it a lot, it's much more efficient.
Sales Mail. Nice. And when you send these video emails, how do you prevent it from seeming like just random solicitations that all of us get every day?
Well, I never recommend sending it as a first reach out. So the things that I find it to be the most effective for is that, like the instance of getting ghosted, if it's somebody that you've already interacted with and for whatever reason, all of a sudden they stop reaching out to, and you're like, what's going on? Why aren't they reaching me? Another one that I found it to be very effective for is to get to the platform above that person. So let's say you're talking to someone and they're like, okay, I'll take this information, you send it to me and I'll give it to my boss. So what I think is really effective is you say, okay, I'll get the information for you that you've asked for, whether it's a quote or, some brochure or whatever it is. And then say, also, I'm going to make a video for your boss. Is that okay? Will you also send that to them? And they'll be like, sure. So you find out the boss's name, you find out a little bit of information. Then when you send them a video, you say, hi, Samuel, I had a great time chatting with, Rebecca today, and she filled me in about your company, that you're looking for X, you're looking for this, you're looking for that. And I'd love to set up a time to talk to you because we actually can offer that. And here's a couple of ways that we're going to be able to talk to you about what you can offer. I'd love to chat with you if it makes sense to come in, hopefully sometime next week or, whatever it is. And I have found that to be a super effective way to get to the boss, because if you just are looking at the brochure or the proposal, they will often not get the gist. You can give them a lot more information, put a face to a name, make it seem like you're a real person, and that helps you get that meeting with the real decision maker. So those are the ways that I think it's the most effective, and not as a first reach out.
Wow, that is fascinating. And then with LinkedIn, I mean, you've really done a number with your profile and your influence on LinkedIn. You teach programs around how to do this, and that's wonderful. We do the same thing. But with your programs, for who is it best for? Would you say for any kind of medical sales professional, a specific type of medical sales professional? Speak to us a little bit about LinkedIn specifically and who you found it to be the most useful for when you're training.
Sure. Yeah. The first thing I would say about LinkedIn is if you're going to use LinkedIn, you have to identify whether you're trying to appeal more to recruiters or whether you're established and you're happy with your company and then you're trying to appeal more to customers. So one of the biggest mistakes I often see is people will have all this stuff about like my quota was, I exceeded my quota 150% and I, won the such and such award and all these things. And customers, that's not appealing to customers. They're like, great, I'm so glad I'm, sending you on some awesome trip with my, sitting at home.
I'm paying for your lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're trying to appeal to recruiters, great. Have as much of that on there as you want and as you can. But if you're actually starting to now try to reach out to customers and get them to want to talk to you, then you got to kind of take all that stuff out. And it's a risk because, you're not going to get recruited as much if you don't have all that in there. But if you're happy where you are and you're really trying to establish your name at your current company, I would recommend saving it all in a document for when you are going to actually do it. You don't have to recreate the wheel, but get that all out of there and talk more about the customers. I wake up every day because I enjoy working with customers. Here's some problems I help them to solve. Here's some of my key accounts that I've established. This is my territory, so that they can know, okay, this person is the right person I should be talking to. So that's one thing about LinkedIn is we've got to really establish that. And then as far as people that are going to be good for using it, I think it depends on your call points. And but honestly, even within, let's say you're talking a lot to biomed, you're probably going to have 50% of biomeds who are never hardly on LinkedIn, but you're going to have 50% who are pretty active on it. Same with nursing. You're going to have a decent amount of nursing that are pretty active on LinkedIn. And even doctors, I think this percentage is lower than it is for biomed or nursing or purchasing or some of the others, but you're still going to have doctors who are active on there. So I would say no matter what you're doing in medical sales, really focus on your profile, making sure your profile, you've got a great picture on there. There's a really neat platform called Photo Feeler. Have you ever seen this?
No, speak about it.
It's one of my favorite things I do in my customer trainings is I pull everyone's picture off of LinkedIn secretly. I don't tell them that I'm doing this. And then I run it through this program called Photo Feeler. And what it basically does is it votes on your picture. It tells you what people are perceiving you as far as how friendly you are, how efficient you are. And they're like, okay, so does this person look like somebody I'd want to interact with? And it gives you a score. So if you're getting it and you're like, oh, my score is only 4.5, then you probably need a new picture.
Wow.
Yeah.
This sounds so subjective. So it objectively is somehow objective.
People are voting on it. Real people are voting on it, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's
how many people?
Well, so you can put in however many you want. So the way it works is you can either buy the votes yourself. And so then you don't have to vote on other people's, or if you don't want to pay for it, then you just have to vote on other people's to earn the credits to do your own thing.
What?
So
wow,
it's pretty cool. And you can even do it for like social, like if you want to get on Grindr or something.
Photo.
Yeah.
Everyone, this will be in the show notes. It's called Photo Feeler.
Photo Feeler.
And people vote on your picture and tell you how like approachable you are or standoffish you are, so on and so forth.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And people are often surprised. They're like, oh gosh, I thought that was a good picture. And a lot of it has to do with the smile and the lighting and all that stuff,
Yeah. So, how long does it take to get your results?
Oh, it's fast. Like if you let's say you only want 20 votes. Like there's been a few times where somebody's picture wasn't up for whatever reason. And I'll say, well, let's put it through. It'll probably be done by the end of this meeting. So within hours, it'll be done.
So, it sounds like this is a great way if you're working with people to improve their profiles and you don't want to tell someone it's a bad picture, this is a great way to do it.
Absolutely. Because I'm not being the bad guy. I'm not like, I don't know about that picture.
That is fascinating. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience today? You've shared so many pearls of wisdom, and for everyone listening, you better be taking notes because she's dropped some just pure gold today. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Any overarching message? Please share with us.
One little nugget I will share: if you're trying to get into medical sales, I would make sure that you ask the question of, are you on a GPO? So what a GPO is a group purchasing organization. And one thing you might not realize is that every hospital is usually part of one of these. So there's a lot of different ones. And basically the reason they join them is to get better deals on stuff. And so most hospitals have to comply with that contract, within 80%, everyone is different. So often I hear people say, oh yeah, I'm going to get this job with this new medical startup. It's this amazing technology and it's got this and it's got that. And they don't realize until after they get the job that they're not on contract with anyone. And this really sets you up for a pretty hard road because you call someone, you're like, oh, great, I've got this new technology to show you. And their customer's like, great, are you on contract? And then they have to say, well, no, we're not. Well, okay. I mean, I can only buy off contract 20% of my buying time. And yours doesn't quite sound like something I'd want to fight for. I mean, to buy off contract, they have to really fight for that product. They have to really want it. And so I would make sure and ask, are you on at least a GPO? Because if not, you're in a potentially a tough spot. And the other thing I would realize about medical sales is that there's 3 different kinds of medical categories. And you may have already covered this, Samuel, and some of your other stuff, but one category is the procedural reps who are going in and looking for and doing procedures. And then the other one is capital. And then the other one is consumable. And then of course there's, pharmaceuticals, and that's its own animal. But I think it's important for somebody like me, who's a mom, to realize if I want to do a procedural sales rep job, that's going to be hard for me because I'm going to have to get there when the doctor wants me to be there at 6:30 or 7 or 7:30 or whenever it is. So unless you have, some flexibility there with somebody else helping you with your kids, that might not be the job for you. Because this is one thing my husband will tell me is, if I tell my sales rep to be there at such and such time and I want them ready with the tray or whatever, they better be there. Period. And so if you don't want that lifestyle, I think you'd be much better off in a capital job, which is much more flexible. You can decide when the meetings are going to be. The consumables might be even better for you because often those sales reps can do their work from home. They're not always even having to get out in the field as much as a capital rep. So as you look at jobs, make sure you're looking at, okay, what is this job really going to be? And what's that lifestyle really going to be for me?
Yep. And as you all know, if you listen to any of our episodes, we help you find exactly what position you're supposed to be in. So, but this categorization is absolutely wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. This has been so enlightening. I love having you on the show today, but we do have one more thing to do, Katie. Are you ready?
I think so. I hope so.
All right. We're going to have our lightning round. You have less than 10 seconds to answer 4 questions.
Oh, gosh.
Starting now. Okay. So, Katie, in the last 6 months, what's been the best book you've read?
Atomic Habits.
That's a good one. That is a good one. What inspired that read? You were told, you saw it online, or you just said, heck,
I saw it online. I can't even remember who recommended it or why, but I read it, and I think it actually might've been about like how to lose weight and whatever. And somebody said, if you're having a hard time staying on a track, now read this book. And now I love it for business too. So
yeah, great. Fascinating one. Best TV show or movie you've seen in the last 6 months?
Well, my daughter is obsessed with Friends, so that's pretty much all I get to watch every night is just one episode of Friends. So I haven't watched anything else. Friends reruns for me.
Does it ever get old?
I mean, no, it really doesn't. I would have to say, because you start over and it takes you a long time to get back.
Yeah, it's almost like Seinfeld. You can just keep doing it.
Yes. Yes, or The Office. Those are all.
The Office is the best. That's my favorite comedy show.
Although we did watch the movie about the Tetris, which was really good, I thought.
I haven't seen it. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, it was really good. I liked it.
I believe it. He always delivers. Okay. Actually, 2 more questions. What's the best meal you've had in the last 6 months?
Well, let's see. We went on vacation and we went on this really amazing boat. And I would say that my favorite meal that we had there, she made fresh sourdough and from scratch that she made herself. And she gave me some of the starter. And so I've been making fresh sourdough, and I know it's not a meal, but I feel like you could basically make sourdough into a meal.
Where do we try this boat meal?
Well, it was on like a catamaran. So in the British Virgin Islands. So, I mean, it's a bit hard to get to, but if you can get there, I recommend it.
All right. All right. Homemade sourdough. And then last question, what's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
I did a training in Boulder for a company called Sakura, and it was an amazing experience. They were so energetic. Every sales rep was excited to learn, and the management they were sitting there. Their entire management staff, the CEO, the CFO, the marketing director, in the front row. I mean, listening, taking notes,
Awesome.
and that's so rare. I feel like in this world, for they're often in the back, checking their email, not really listening, thinking that they know everything. And I just thought it was such an amazing experience that they were all engaged and wanting to learn, so they would all be on the same page as they were moving forward. And everything they did was just wonderful. It was a great meal. It was a great experience.
That is beautiful. Well, Katie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for all the wisdom you shared with us. And we look forward to the wonderful things you're going to be doing on the LinkedIn platform and turning these companies around with their sales forces. So thank you again.
Yes. Oh, can I put in plug real quick for my book?
Better.
It's going to be coming out very soon.
Yes, please.
Okay,
tell us.
good.
Where do we get it?
So by the time this episode comes out, it will probably be out, and I haven't totally decided on a title yet, but by the time this episode comes out, I'll put it in the show notes of where you can get it. You'll be able to get it on Amazon. And it's basically what I do is a lot of the things I talked about today, I'm just going to go into a lot more detail about, including my customer research and how to do video messaging and really get into the nitty gritty of it and all those things. So I would love it if you would check it out, and you can get to it from the show notes probably.
Absolutely. We'll probably add it to our required reading because we've really talked about some amazing things. Well, thank you again.
Great.
Kate. It was wonderful having you.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
And that was Katie Mullen. Rock stars. You heard it here, folks. Being a good listener, having that grit, and being optimistic in literally every situation. It was such a pleasure having Katie on the show because these are the things that every sales professional needs to always keep in mind, no matter what's going on in their career. Now, you're listening to this episode, and you might be somebody that's looking to get into a medical sales position. Maybe you want to be in pharmaceutical sales, or maybe you want to be in medical device sales, or maybe you want to be in diagnostic testing sales, or maybe you have no idea. Well, whether you know or not, you know where you need to go. And if you don't, I'm about to tell you. You need to go to evolveyoursuccess.com. Go there, hit apply now, fill out our application, and get in touch with one of our account executives. They will show you and introduce you to a program called the Medical Sales Career Builder that will literally change your life. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.